Hi, and yeah, welcome to this session. Thanks for coming along and listening. So there are 7 of us on this session. I've got 1 person still to arrive. Actually, there's 8 of us because we've got 2 people from East Newmarket Garden. So this session is on setting up a CSA. I'm going to give a brief introduction to what CSA is and why it's so brilliant. And then we're going to have 6 sort of separate speakers talking about setting up a producer-led CSA, setting up a community-led CSA, governance and logistics, marketing, communications and engaging your membership, site planning and infrastructure, and crop planning and year-round growing. There might be a little bit of time at the end for questions, but if you do have questions while the speakers are talking, then please put them in chat. And it would also be really lovely if you could say who you are and what your interest in CSA is in the chat now. So yeah, I'm Susie Russell. I'm the coordinator of the UK Community Supported Agriculture Network. My background is in community development and environmental and arts stuff. It's probably not a very professional way of saying it. We've got with us Becca Stevenson. So Becca is head grower at 5 Acre Community Farm, a 7-acre organic vegetable CSA founded in 2012 and supplying over 100 households. We will have with us Rhiann Williams, who isn't here yet, but is going to be here to talk about crop planning. Rhiann is the head grower at Kirkstall Valley Farm in Leeds. She completed a traineeship at Caitan CSA on the Gower in Wales in 2019 and has just finished her first season as one of the growers at Kirkstall Valley Farm, a community farm-led farm and CSA right in the middle of Leeds. She organises with the Land Workers Alliance and is excited to be part of a movement working towards socially and environmentally just food systems. We've got Connie Hunter and Tom Booth from East Newmarket Garden in Fife in Scotland. East Newmarket Garden is a 2-acre small-scale agroecological farm and CSA located on the Firth of Forth in Fife, Scotland. Along with their 60-member CSA, they also attend farmers markets and sell their produce to local restaurants and cafes. We've got Janine McMahon from Moss Lane Farm in Manchester. Janine set up and runs an organic CSA farm on the outskirts of Manchester. They're a sustainable food hub, passionate about educating people about where their food comes from and making it accessible. They produce good, healthy food directly from the farm, which is affordable for all. We've got Christine Morrison from Go Local Food in Northumberland. So Christine is part of Go Local Food, operational for nearly 10 years, which she's put in brackets is no small achievement. And it's been an interesting journey finding out how best to connect to disparate communities, create ownership and maintain involvement. And then we've got Mick Marston, who is part of Gibbside Community Farm in Gateshead. Mick has previously worked for the Federation of City Farms and Community Gardens and for the Soil Association in Northern England, Scotland and Northern Ireland. And he's a founder member of Gibbside Community Farm and also a board member of the UK CSA Network. And I've just seen that Rhiann's arrived. Hi, Rhiann. Rhiann recently broke her wrist, I think, so I hope you're okay. Okay, so I'm going to start by just giving you a very rapid run through of CSA. Yeah, do please put who you are in the chat and do also ask questions if you have them. So what is community supported agriculture? Well, it's good for people, good for planet and good for producer, which at the moment makes it, we think, just about the best small farming system you can have. CSA farms in the UK share the following 4 characteristics, and these are in the UK CSA Charter, which is agreed. We've just rewritten the Charter and it's been agreed by our membership. So we're a member-led co-op. So yeah, everything we do kind of has to go through the membership. So CSA farms grow agroecologically, and we use the definition of agroecological from the European Agroecology Network. They're viable businesses, and I guess that's what differentiates them from, say, a community farm or garden, where they might grow food and sell it, but the main aim of the community farm is, say, therapeutic or educational. A CSA, its main aim is to be a viable business producing food, fuel or fibre. That's not to say it doesn't do therapeutic or educational community development stuff as well. There's intrinsic community investment. So most often that takes the form of subscription. So the members or customers of the CSA sign up for a season. So they sign up to buy from that farm for the whole year. There's also volunteering on every CSA, and sometimes CSA farms are actually owned by members. And it's a local direct sales model with the majority of the produce from the farm itself. So most of our CSAs operate with their membership within a 15-mile radius, and a lot of them a lot smaller, sort of 5 to 8 miles. And yeah, they don't, so they might buy in small amounts of food. Some CSAs who don't have that much land buy in some of the field scale crops like roots, like potatoes, and some of them buy in because they don't have adequate storage over winter. But the majority of what they put in their shares comes from the farm. Most CSAs in the UK are horticultural, but there are also flower, livestock, poultry, egg, fish, herb, and fuel CSAs. CSA is amazing. It gives you access to local, fresh, nutritious food. It's part of creating sustainable food systems. It really ties people into the land and to farming. It has mental, physical, and health and well-being benefits. The whole farming pound stays in the local economy. So much more of the farming pound is retained in the local economy than it is on a more traditional farm. It provides environmental benefits and public goods. It supports job creation, skills development, provides volunteering opportunities, creates communities around food, is an economically viable, stable income for farmers, and they're self-reliant and a really good model for new entrants into farming. And this is just, I love these aerial photos just for how they show the sort of diversity of what CSAs grow. So this is Tomnahar in Scotland, which is a vegetable and flower CSA. And this is School Farm in Devon, vegetable CSA, where they do a lot of training as well. And then I was just going to show a short bit of this film, if I can make it work. So I'm not going to show it all. I'm just going to show you a tiny bit. This is a farm in Wales.
You love it intensely. There's no better livelihood we have. CSA, community supported agriculture, is where the community and the farmer form a partnership together. They share the responsibility, they share the cost, and they share the produce. Now we're doing really what we should be doing as farmers. We're feeding our local community. It's a loving, caring relationship. And what this has done since we've had the CSA, it's really opened the door for having volunteers, woofers, foreign young people to come and stay on the farm and work with us, helping to grow the vegetables. And it's brought a young, loving spirit onto the farm. And they had space to connect with food and the importance of food. And this to me is one of the best things that's happened on this farm.
So I hope you could hear that okay. And this is a second one. This is the Oak Tree Community Farm in Suffolk.
Of all human activities, farming has the biggest impact on both climate change and biodiversity. Most industrial farms work unsustainably and are slowly ruining the soil that supports.
Just outside Ipswich, there is a farm with a difference.
At the Oak Tree Community Farm, we're using sustainable farming techniques to replenish the soil, reduce carbon, and build up a healthy soil ecology. We are working with nature to grow our food while nourishing the soil so that it only gets better year on year.
And what's more, the veg, eggs, flowers and fruit that we grow go directly to our members, who get to eat fresh local produce from the farm every week of the year, safe in the knowledge that there have been no artificial chemicals used on our farm. They know this because they are involved with the growing themselves.
They spend time at the farm, enjoying the outdoors with like-minded people and reconnecting with the land. We're not just a farm, we're a community.
Our happy chickens live outside all year round and have plenty of space to roam. They love scratching for worms and insects in the soil and feasting on the fresh grass that we move them onto each few weeks. Not surprisingly, they lay the tastiest eggs.
Through the summer, our flower gardens are bursting with colour and insects. We sell beautiful bunches to our members. Lots of people like to pick their own to take home. We asked our members what they loved most about being part of the Oak Tree Community Farm. This is what they said.
It's a haven. This stuff is genuinely fresh. It's fresher than you'll get anywhere else.
It's very fun watering the plants. It's like workout. I get the gym that and I can feel better outside.
This is the Oak Tree Farm, and you get away from it all. It's only 100 yards down the road, and we're in Rushmere.
Learn how to plant things, how to tend the land.
Yeah, me being a plant killer, I think I've got a
city
lot to
girl.
learn.
Yeah.
We met two lovely people who met weeding leeks and then they got married. So we've had some Oak Tree love stories. But I've made some brilliant friends here, like people that I don't think I would have met otherwise.
The weekly veg box is just a small part of what we get out of the farm.
We learn, we enjoy the outdoors, and we strive towards a shared goal.
To demonstrate how producing fresh, nutritious food can be rewarding, fulfilling, but most of all, fun.
So I hope you could hear that okay. Sorry, I think I didn't press the right button on the audio and then I didn't want to go back and mess up the whole thing. So I just thought I'd give you, these are 4 case studies of 4 of our farms. So this is Chug, and for anyone interested, I can send you these. This is Chug Food in Devon. They've the producer-led CSA that've been around since 2010. Kaitan, where Rianne did her apprenticeship, on the Gower in Wales. Go Local Food, where Christine is from, and Flintshire on the Welsh borders. So 4 very different CSAs, but the model in the UK is quite diverse, and that's one of the things that makes it so amazing, I think. And then just to finish with a brief bit about us. So we are the only organisation dedicated to supporting and promoting CSA in the UK. We're a multi-stakeholder co-op for CSA farms, as well as organisations and individuals who support them. And we've got over 170 farm members. We've seen real growth in the last kind of 18 months, 2 years. You can see from the graphic on the right of the screen, in March 19, we had 65 members and we're up to over 170 now. So we think that's around 50,000 people eating from CSA. We were launched in 2013. Our mission is to support and promote CSA farms to flourish across the country and working towards a fair, sustainable and resilient food system. And our vision is a thriving CSA in every neighbourhood across the UK. And what we do on a day-to-day basis is we provide a network, and we connect people up from both within the CSA movement and from without it, so connecting different organisations and individuals into the network. We support new and existing CSAs, and we do that through resources, events, some training. We support our CSAs to deliver training as well. We do mentoring. So we kind of, the advice bit is, yeah, we currently offer a day's mentoring, or with some CSAs are on a new pilot incubator scheme. In fact, Kirkstall, where Rianne's from, is on that scheme. We promote and raise awareness and understanding of the CSA model amongst farmers, growers, the wider public and government. And we advocate for CSA in policy, intergovernment and local government. And we provide a means of communication with and representation to the wider global CSA movement, Urgency, which supports CSA networks in over 50 countries across the world. So that's the end of my short presentation. And I think I can't see any questions in the chat. So I think we'll just move straight on to the 6 panelists all talking. So we're going to start with Tom and Connie from East Newt Market Garden talking about, so I guess I should preface this by saying that although CSAs kind of end up being quite similar. They tend to start from two different routes, and they're not clear cut, but generally CSAs will either start from a couple of people who are growers or farmers and want, like the CSA model, and so find some land and then find a membership to support them. Or they'll start from a community who say there's no access to decent food here, and so they'll set up some kind of often voluntary organisation or community interest company, and then often that usually voluntary run organisation will employ growers or farmers to farm. Sometimes there are also paid finance workers or admin workers or managers, but generally, yeah, the model starts the other way around. So Tom and Connie are going to talk about the producer-led model, and Becca from 5 Acre is going to talk about the community-led model. So over to you, Tom and Connie.
Hi everyone. Hi, we've got a presentation, so we'll try doing a screen share now. Hopefully that will work. So is that working? Yeah, cool. Okay, so yeah, we're East Market Garden, Tom and Connie, and yeah, we're in the East Nook of Fife in eastern Scotland, about 25 minutes from St Andrews, and between Dundee and Edinburgh on the Firth of Forth. Yeah, so this is just sort of broad stuff about us. We're new entrants to growing. We set up in November 2018, or started setting up and then started trading in 2019. After we had a years of like paid work, jobs at a farm in Fife, and then sort of got onto the land here. We rent the land, it's 2 acres at the moment, from Balcaski Estate. And yeah, the CSA is last year was 40% of our income, and we also sell to restaurants and cafes and shops and a farmers market. But the CSA sort of portion has grown from our initial share through the years. So yeah, that's a picture taken like a month ago or something like that. So that's us now.
Hi, I'm Connie. So yeah, basically the question was about setting up a producer-led CSA, and obviously there's quite a lot of things we could talk about, but we tried to break it up into setting up and then being a producer-led CSA. And I would say probably one of the things that distinguishes us as a producer-led CSA from the community-led one is kind of the idea of where are you going to be. Just because for new entrants, access to land is such a huge barrier and challenge that would be a whole different topic of conversation. But yeah, for us it wasn't so difficult because we were working nearby, and my mum was already renting land from the Balcaski estate for a cut flower business, so we already had links to a landlord in the area. But obviously there's lots of things to consider when choosing where you want to set up. You know, the climate, the soil, does the site have access, is there water, electricity, what's the fencing situation, and the last 3 things about market, competition and collaboration, and kind of whether you own or rent, and what your relationship with your landlord is. Those last 3 things we'll go into a little bit more detail of just now.
Okay, so that's me. So yeah, so the market, like basically, if you're producer led, so you're sort of going in somewhere and trying to make an offer to a population, you need to think about what other people are in your area doing similar things. And yeah, and the basic question, is there demand, or can you see yourself making demand for what you want to offer as part of a CSA? So we already knew obviously about a couple farm. We kind of knew a bit of the scene in Fife because we've been working there on farms already. And there's 2 major box schemes that aren't CSA style farms. And then there's a couple also in the Falkland area, that lower orange dot, there's a couple of smaller farms that kind of run also more like a small farm CSA, although I'm not sure if they do refer to themselves as CSA. But anyway, so I'm just trying to find my notes. Yeah, and that we kind of were confident there was a market because the area that we're in has kind of quite a localized economy and a lot of a focus on supporting local businesses and things like that. And more than that, also we rent the land, and we rent from an estate, the Bakassi estate, that are trying to do things in terms of reinvigorating the local food economy more generally. So we kind of could fit into that. We're near a building called the Bow House, which is kind of trying to sort of be a food hub. There's a butchery, Scotland the Bread are there. Hopefully there's a brewery. So there's kind of a food scene happening. So we kind of felt like it was a good place for us. But yeah, a big thing to do is you could do some market research to help gauge interest, like surveys, like leaflet drops. We didn't do that. We just kind of started getting contacted. But that would definitely be useful. And the other thing, obviously, like I mentioned, we're 25 minutes from St Andrews. We don't actually go there yet. Our market's still only in the East Nook, but it's important to think about the major conurbations near you as a CSA, because often maybe your pioneer customers are usually going to be more urban. But yeah, so then yeah, competition and collaboration is sort of similar, related to that. Phrase it like that because our experience so far is there's quite a delicate balance of way of working with existing farmers and other farms. Like obvious things is like sometimes buying and selling from each other and sharing resources, deliveries and training. You can do that with people, but it's also about like feeling with each other where you're comfortable in terms of yeah, I mean competition if you're but we share some stuff with Sarah, Connie's mum, who has Keeping the Plot Flowers next door, and that's really helpful having another grower next door because we can talk about stuff, we can share things. Yeah, and finally then just renting or buying. So yeah, if you're like a producer, you might already have a farm, so this isn't related to you, but if you're a new entrant or trying to find a site, then there's the discussion, about what's best to do. There's pros and cons of both. For us, the pros of having a supportive landlord who's interested in localizing food in our area outweighed any cons of investing in a piece of land we don't own. So if our landlord's very good, so they put in fencing, water and electricity. We have access to organic manure from their cow production, and they're quite supportive. So that's really helpful, especially if you're a smaller style of producer, to think about looking for landlords who kind of, at least in some way, get your project, because you can get a lot of a boost from being with people who kind of understand what you're trying to do. Yeah.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about finances. Obviously, you can't really talk about setting up anything without talking about money. I think we spent, being brutally honest, we spent about £30,000 setting up, and that's kind of, obviously it's a lot, and we could have taken more time to do it cheaper. We could have had lots of secondhand polytunnels, building our own shed, but we didn't do those things just because we weighed up the pros and cons of like where our skills were and how much time and energy we had. So a friend built our shed, which you can see there looking like a box, and that allowed us to put up our own polytunnels, because then we had time to do that, and it paid for everything that we needed to get started. That list there, all the harvesting equipment, tools, MyPex, propagation, blah blah blah. Obviously you can spend much less money than that and buy those things gradually over a longer period of time, and lots of people do that. We were just in a really fortunate position to be able to do that, and I would say that having more money to start with, obviously it meant that we could start making money sooner as well. So that's just one thing to think about. We were also really lucky because we both had part-time jobs in the beginning, which is another reason why we didn't have so much time to like learn how to build a shed. But that meant that we didn't need the income from the farm straight away. And that's something we're still working on. So we do get most of our income from the farm, but it's 3 years in. This is the end of our third season, and the farm provides 3/4 of our personal income.
Carry on.
Okay. So yeah, the last bit, hopefully we're not taking up too much time, sorry, is the bit about being a producer-led CSA. So Some of this will be the same as being a community-led CSA. We are seasonal, we're May to December. We don't have enough land currently to go throughout the winter in terms of having enough storage space and all that kind of stuff. We do lots of variety to keep things interesting for customers. That's something that frequently comes back as one of the best things in our feedback forms. We do buy in occasionally. That was kind of forced upon us by lockdown. And now if we might have to buy in at the very end of the season if we've kind of run out, but if we do buy in the main bit of the season, it's actually mostly to support other local growers. Customers can pay up front at the start of the season in the sort of traditional CSA model, but we also offer that in 2 installments, but we want it to be as accessible as possible. So you can also pay weekly by standing order, that's fine. And you're just as much a member as anyone else. We do 3 different sizes, and that is really helpful because actually lots of people want smaller veg boxes. People who are on their own find it annoying that everything's always geared towards couples and families. So yeah, we have a lot of small bags. That's fine so long as you price them appropriately, I think. And it allows us to be flexible. We may not have 60 shares of tomatoes, but we may have 20 shares of tomatoes, and then the mediums can get them next week or whatever. It's quite good to have that flexibility. The sort of community aspect of what we do is through a number of things. So we do weekly newsletters, open days, which we want to do more of, and people mostly collect from the farm. So we have about 20% of people have deliveries. So still most people are coming to the farm to collect every week and stopping for a chat and that kind of thing. We don't use any software. There's various different things out there for managing veg boxes. Ubi and Buckybox are some of the ones that I'm a bit familiar with. Currently, we just use Excel, emails, and like online personal banking, and that's served us reasonably well so far. Obviously, we don't, allow sort of choices. We decide what goes in the bags, but we do have a sort of swap shop. So if people want to swap things in and out, they can, and that's good because that allows for some level of choice. We started really small, so in our first year we just had 5. That sort of shows you how many people we had at the beginning and how many we had at the end of each season. And the reason behind that is just because we're kind of conservative about how much food and abundance there will be in May and June, but as the fruiting crops start kicking in July, we always feel like we might be able to add in a few more people, and we like to keep that option.
That's like it's just a learning thing as well about being a grower, like being able to look at the field and look at the weather and know what you're producing. That's something that takes time to sort of have a feel of. So it's nice to be able to be a bit flexible, like to not have only the shares bought at the start of the year and then that be it. So it's quite useful to be able to bring people in on a weekly payment sort of later in the season. And then finally, just our marketing was pretty minimal. We just we were contacted through social media, and obviously used social media for like just generally for communication, and through markets, Bowhouse, but also other farmers markets. We'd have a sign-up sheet and information, and that worked really well for us. We still have a waiting list, so yeah, that's basically it. I think in places where the farmers markets scene stuff isn't so good, you'd have to do more like direct communication, I think. But yeah, using other outlets that you sell through is a really good way of finding customers. And that's it, I think. Yeah. But no, there's no questions. Not until later.
Thank you, Tom and Connie. That was amazingly rich. I felt like there was just a massive wealth of information in there. So thank you. And please do ask questions in chat. We've decided to run the session slightly differently because we had a limited number of people and we wanted to give you a bit of everything. So there isn't going to be much time for questions, but there is a chat box and you can ask people questions in that. So I'm now going to hand over to Becca from 5 Acre, who's going to talk about setting up the CSA from a community-led point of view. Thanks, Becca.
That's all right. Hello, everybody. Right, so I haven't got a slideshow, but I thought it's quite good that, sort of grower-led side has sort of started off, so I don't need to overlap on things. So generally, when you're starting off as a community, so I can tell you about what happened at 5 Acre and Canalside, which both run very similarly. So at 5 Acre, let's start at Canalside, that started up first. So at Canalside, there's basically a farmer's son who wanted to get into doing a CSA, And so he basically sort of said to his dad, you know, can we have some of those fields? And then he sort of found some local people who he thought might be interested in setting up a CSA, which happened to sort of be a transition town group in Leamington. And they were all really keen. So basically the land was there, so there was no looking for land. And the similar sort of thing happened at 5 Acre, whereas there was the Garden Organic site in Wrighton, and the basically they approached Gareth, who used to work with them, who helped set up Canalside, and said, oh, do you want to do that for the field that we don't use anymore? And so then he approached a fledgling transition town, Coventry, and they went, oh, that's a great idea. So, you know, it's finding the people is sort of the first thing if you're going to do a community group. Like, we've tried setting up another one in Rugby, and we were approached by some farmers saying, we've got some land, would you like to use it? But that all fell through until when they realised how little rent they'd be getting off us. But yeah, it's the communication needs to happen about people. Sometimes you've got to get the right match with the landlord, basically, who's sympathetic to the cause. So yeah, eventually Canalside went down the buying of the land route. And so they had to change. They were a community interest company, and they changed to a community benefit society, a co-op sort of setup, so that they could basically raise community share offers and buy the land that way, which they did really quickly in about, I think it was a 6-week window they had to sort of crowdfund it, and they'd raised all the money plus a bit more in about 4 or 5 weeks. So, you know, it's definitely doable. They raised for over £100,000 pretty quickly. So that keeps me enthused that if we do find another bit of land to set up another farm around here, we'll be able to manage it somehow. So the next step would be, I suppose, to hold meetings and find your members. So when 5 Acre was starting up, lots of different meetings were held with various groups that people thought might be interested, and just open public meetings to say to people, look, this is what we want to do, come and get involved, you know, sign up here. And so that's how it started building. And then I suppose you're looking at raising funds. So you might already have things on the site. So we were really lucky at 5 Acre. We already had, because the site was, you know, run by Garden Organic, and it used to be a trial field, there was already a tractor, loads of machinery, heated fancy glass houses, some polytunnels. So all we had to do was buy like a decent shed, a whole load of hand tools, some big EnviroMesh crop covers, some stuff like that, some seeds. So we asked people who were keen on joining to give us loans, of which we said we'd pay them back after about 3 years. And then we also got some small capital grants for some of those sort of tools and things like that. And now, you know, nearly 10 years on, all the kind of loans are either paid back, or folks decided they were quite happy to let us keep it. And a similar sort of thing happened at Canalside as well. I think they had to buy slightly more stuff, and there wasn't as much infrastructure already on site, so they had to build a pole barn and stuff like that. But if you look at that as more of an opportunity to build community by engaging people in coming to help, volunteer, you know, build a barn, those sorts of things are all kind of good opportunities to kind of get your members involved in the farm and feel a sense of ownership over it. And then you've got to start, once you've got some of your infrastructure in, you start thinking about growing stuff, you need to find a grower. So I was hired by the steering group of 5 Acre to be the grower back in 2013. And Canalside recently have decided to go down the route of having lots of, they've got about 4 people working, basically job sharing the growing role between 4 people, which, you know, works for them, involves a bit more communication between all of them, so they know what they're all doing, but that's good. We've also at 5 Acre got an admin person and a finance person. So they're both paid roles. So I don't have to worry about doing that, which is great. I've done that before. It's not as much fun as you'd like. It's a lot of work. I suppose that's, to me, in my mind, because I've done grower-led CSA as well in my past. That's the biggest difference, I'd say, is being able to be a grower and just a grower, and being able to get like a wage and, you know, you're employed. So that, to me, as a grower, is like the biggest difference compared to being self-employed and not getting holiday pay and pension and stuff like that. And then, you know, whilst you're holding all these meetings and raising the funds and starting to get going, you're kind of looking to find volunteers who want to come and help out. So initially we sort of started out with some volunteers. We'd offer them like a share of vegetables for coming and doing a morning's work every week. So that kind of works for some folks who are, you know, either on lower incomes or just, you know, want to have that free time and sort of come and have something regular in their week. How 5 Acres working now, we've got about 100 families we feed every week. We go all year round. We don't buy anything in. It's all organic as well, so we can sell some wholesale stuff to some organic shops in Coventry. We just do 2 sizes of veg, so it's either, you know, small or twice the bit size of the small. And members come and pack their own veg at the farm, so we harvest it and they weigh it out themselves, which saves us a load of time. Although there are some collection groups where people will, if they live near each other, we try and put them together so that one person will go up and collect for like 3 other people, and so there's not as many cars going backwards and forwards to the farm. Unfortunately, we're not on a bus route, so that can be a big challenge, even though we're only 6 miles out of Coventry and about 8 miles out of Rugby. So yeah, that's another thing to think about, public transport. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Thanks, Becca. That was great. And yeah, really, really good to hear from a community-led one. And I mean, yeah, 5 Acre and Canalside are kind of beacons of community-led CSA. So if you're ever in the area, go and visit. So now Janine from Moss Lane Farm outside Manchester is going to talk about kind of governance, governance things. So over to you, Janine.
Hello, can everybody hear me okay? Yeah, super, that's brilliant. So I'm Janine McMahon. I run a family organic farm here in Salford. Everybody heard of Salford? And we're based on an area called Chatmoss. And what we do is we're an organic community CSA farm. And the government's over what I would give you a bit of an insight to where we started off. So we started off as we bought our farm over 11 years ago now. Very passionate about farming and very passionate about growing food. But when we come into obviously farming itself, it was like really non-heard of, or no one really sort of looked into kind of food or was that kind of connected with it. So we started out in a CSA back in 2018, and what we wanted to do is obviously reconnect the land back with the community. So we started out as a community-led CSA. That gave us the opportunity. Sorry, can you not hear me? Can you hear me? Can everybody speak up, say that you can hear me? No? Can you wave to say that you can hear? Oh, right, okay, thank you. So it's Christine, right, okay. Can you hear me, Christine? Yeah, excellent, right, so I'll go back. So yeah, so we started off as a community-led CSA, and that was really to find out where our community was when it comes to food, and we wanted to reconnect the land and obviously farming back with obviously the community. Where we're actually, our area, we don't have a localised food system. it's very much sort of like been left behind when it comes to food. So we wanted to focus more on finding out what our community wanted, where our needs were, and where do we lie within the community, and engaging obviously with more like-minded kind of community projects and community organisations. So we looked at what we did is we managed to form a group, a network of people who were really keen about getting growing and learning how to grow and reconnecting people back with local food. So what we did is we formed like a community interest company called Green Teach, but we ran that for quite a long time because of non-for-profit, and we approached more volunteering groups of people. So our government structure was really based on we all had our own responsibilities. We all come from different kind of areas, and we thought like come together and use our kind of skills and knowledge and form the CSA. And how we did that is we started to grow our own food, and we opened up the farm as a therapeutic growing area. So we created some allotment areas and did a therapeutic growing area. That basically brought in a lot of social organisations using the space and a lot of volunteers. You know, we also as well grew a lot of vegetables in that as well. Now, over time, what we discovered is that we were, because of adapting to climate change and stuff, we had to switch our model over to a producer-led model, because we were more of a producer. We were finding that we could only really grow what we could obviously grow here, and then offering that back out into the community. Now, what we did is what we enjoy about that was obviously bringing people together through food. That was the main thing. What really sort of inspired and grew for us was that people love to be learning about food, growing food, talking about food, understanding where our food comes from. So we ran a lot of activities here on the farm based around food, based around nature, and based about incorporating local food back into the community. So we did a lot of followed a lot of cooking clubs and stuff like that, and they give us the opportunity to reconnect with people back in the community with food. Now, the government side of it, when it comes to the local authority side of things, we were very much left alone. Sorry, I've got a child with me. When it comes to the local authority side of things and getting support that way, we were very much independent and left on our own. And then what we had to find is we had to find our feet ourselves in terms of working with the local authority in terms of what kind of logistics we needed. Sorry, you just have to bear with. Sorry, can I switch over to Christine, because my child just decided to come in and disturb things. I'm so sorry about that.
Christine, are you happy to take over? This is Christine from Go Local in Northumberland.
Not sure I can follow that, actually. It's sounded much more entertaining. I think this session may be coming almost death by PowerPoint. I did a PowerPoint presentation as well, and I took a slightly different route to doing it, and I'm going to cross over a lot of what has already been said. So I'm going to try and talk extremely fast, which won't be unusual. So I'm just going to share my screen, hoping that it does when I want it to. And give you, my task was to talk about, go away. Oops, no, that's not what I want to talk about at all. Hang on a minute. My task was to talk about membership building, growing a membership. Because one of the key things, as you'll already have heard, is that the biggest resource, as we all know, in organisations is people, not tractors. So what we need to do is to create a membership rich organisation, and that's where our success will come from. So this was all about our learning journey in terms of doing that, and we of course we're still on the journey like everyone else. So there are three aspects. Every organisation will have three aspects in building its success as a relationship rich organisation. First of all, we would say there's the message, and then the market, and then the motivation. We talk in our co-op, we talk about membership, but some organisations will be talking about customers, some organisations will be talking about subscribers, whatever it is, the key thing is motivation. And these circles should perhaps be a Venn diagram because they're overlapping, aren't they? It's a dynamic process. You go backwards and forwards between these three bubbles all the time. So to take the first one, I think the question that we have to ask ourselves first is, what's the proposition? What's the vision? What is it that you want to do? And we've heard quite a lot about what the other CSAs have as their kind of key messages. And then kind of testing out what our way of going up was testing out the vision, finding ways to gather contacts in one way, shape or form, and using those contacts as a base to consult on what your proposition. And that's the bit that Tom talked about, market research. We just talked, I mean, market research sounds very grand, but lots of conversations in pubs will do fine. And then with that, from those conversations, you refine your proposition, you tweak it a bit. And from that comes what's going to make you in your area completely unique, your unique selling point. At which point you're able to start making that offer to see whether it works and recruiting people into your group. What we did, what we did in that first part of creating the market was buy lots of veg up and create £3 bags of veg and stand outside the local pub and say, look, we could do this. We could do this on our back doorstep, because there's nothing around us at that time that was of a similar, you can point to anything to say, oh, look, there's a CSA down the road, let's do one here. So we were starting with a very blank canvas. And basically we were doing that not to raise awareness, but also to gather those contacts, to get those email addresses. We got the email addresses and we invited them all to a public meeting where we did an initial presentation of our vision and our ideas. And following that, we went about and collected more email addresses and then sent out an initial questionnaire to begin to identify what the hooks would be for our local market. We also have a quarterly newsletter now that's available to anybody from our website. And that's quite a useful way of checking out the market and the message. We do a regular review of our message, and most importantly, I suppose, or the most tricky bit sometimes, is writing it down in a short, snappy way or an interesting way that actually will communicate what you want to do to the audience that you want to reach. So the next and most important thing is knowing your target audience. So obviously there's geography, and people have talked about that. And Tom talked about finding out who else is doing what in your area. Kind of researching the demographics of your area, although you already know that. It's always worth just checking out your assumptions and then looking at where your ideas, your vision, your ideas fit within the area in which you want to work, from which you can then begin to define your initial target audience and decide what's the best way to reach people. And some people will respond better to some methods than others. So our approach was to use local newspapers, local newsletters, freebie magazines, gather information from local authority. We don't have a relationship with a local authority, perhaps we should. But, so gather some information, what's on our doorstep and who's on our doorstep, internet research about what else was going on around our ideas, that initial questionnaire to all the contacts we made, going out like everybody else to events and trying to make ourselves obvious to people, and looking at the themes on which to base our offer and our communication with the members. What were the hooks that we were going to use? I'll come back to that. And with that, you can target, can't you? Target the offers that you want to make to people. And we're also just testing out, partnering up with other organisations, other producers, local producers, so that we increase our exposure to a new and different audience. And then the last stage, which informs all the other stages, is to know your members. So it really is getting to know your members very well and creating that community that in the film that Susie showed us. It's very important aspect of it, because it's all about relationships and people, is that building a sense of community. So finding out what interests your members, finding lots of opportunities for people to meet each other and talk, keeping people well informed of what's going on, even if they don't read anything you send them, creating opportunities for people to get together at the drop of a hat, and utilising skills, knowledge and experience within the membership. So what did we do? Oh no, we didn't do that. We set up a buddying system, so any new member gets a buddy to show them around, show them the ropes, because there's always lots and lots of information to take in at the beginning, and it's all a bit bamboozling because it's not normal. We created a member's handbook. We have like the others, a weekly email bulletin. There's within our rules, because we're a member-led cooperative, a community benefit society. Our rules specify 4 member meetings a year plus the AGM. But they're very important to us, and that's where we can involve people in decision making. We run an annual survey, which is always a hotly contentious discussions afterwards, but it's great. We get very, very good response to that. And we have, of course, all the things like the members' Facebook page and lots of different WhatsApp groups that drive me nuts. And then there's always the opportunity to be volunteering and the ever important social events. And I think I'll stop there, because I think I've probably said as much as everybody else all has already said.
Brilliant, Christine. Thank you. That was a fantastic whistle-top tour through creating a membership from nothing. And I love Go Local's initial standing outside the pub with you didn't say that, you then said that this is as local as we can get, and I think, where did you say the veg came from? It was like miles away.
Ely.
I mean,
we got as far as Ely.
so yeah, trying to find local veg in Northumberland. And you also, I remember you saying to me in a chat that you're surrounded by farmland, but none of the produce from that farmland is going anywhere near your local community as its final destination. So that was one of your real kind of drivers. So yeah, thank you for that. Now we've got 2 more practical speakers. So they've got Mick from Gibbside and Rhiannon from Kirkstall. So Mick is going to talk to us about the kind of infrastructure side of CSA. What do you need? What do you need to look for in your land? And then what do you need to put on it? What do you need to think about when you're planning it? And then Rhiannon is going to talk to us about crop planning and what you might grow and how you might make decisions about what to grow and how much to grow. So I'm going to hand it, and then there'll be a chance for some questions at the end. So get your questions ready. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Mick. Thanks, Mick.
Hello. No PowerPoint. Piece of paper. Old school. Well, it's a bit. It's a bit of a.
We can't see you very well, Mick.
Oh no.
Your background's gone a bit funny. I mean, we can hear you.
It's gone dark. Is that any better?
That's better. You're still in and out, but hey.
Oh well, never mind. It's gone dark up here in Gateshead. Well, it's a bit of a revision and a bit of new information. So for those people who remembered what all the other people said about infrastructure, I'm going to quickly go through it, but then I'll add some things. I think the first thing I would say about starting a CSA is you start from the ground up. So I always say to people, you need to spend a bit of time auditing where you are. Having a look at your land, going there on different days, looking where the sun rises and where the sun sets and where the wind's coming from. And basically, because if this is going to be your home for a while, you need to make a plan on the basis of what you see, what you hear, and in some cases, what you can smell. When you've got that far, maybe you should think about, well, what was this land used before? And we had a couple of surprises. First of all, there was an old railway, wooden railway, went through the land, which we didn't know anything about until somebody said, have you seen this railway going through your land? No. Anyway, it wasn't a hysterical moment because we thought, oh God, we can't do any digging. And the next thing we were told, you know, your soil, it looks really, really rich and black. Yeah, that was because it was a coal mine. So that was a bit of a shock as well. But so therefore it pays to have a little look at maps, ask local farmers what the land was used for. We suspect our land sort of in its early was used very much as a night soil dump, because we've got so much glass and pottery for a field that has never had anybody living on it. So we suspect that's come all the way from Gateshead and the surrounding area. There's a fantastic collection of pottery, another project. So when you've got an audit and you know a little bit about the history, then you start thinking to yourself, well, what do I need? What are the basics? Well, you probably think, let's take the home as the analogy. Well, you need a bit of shelter. You probably need water. You probably need for it to be warm. And at this time of year, maybe, just maybe, you might need it to be a light. However, we manage without it. So, some basic utilities to look at. You'd be surprised and sometimes shocked to realize how difficult sometimes it is just to get some basic utilities to a site. Particularly, I mean, we don't live that far away from a conurbation, but we've got no sewage at all. So our solution is a composting toilet. We have some water because the main water main goes past our site, goes to the golf course. So we've got very high pressure, which is very unusual in a rural situation. Power, I mentioned, yeah. Our local power company said for a small fee of £28,000, we'll connect you to the national grid. I said, if I had £28,000, the national grid would not be something I'd be connecting to. Let's get down to the detail. What are you going to do? Have you got money? It was interesting that how people started. Some people started with, yeah, I mean, that was a hell of a wish at 5 acres. Oh, well, we just had a few we had a greenhouse and some polytunnels and tractors and things like that. Yeah, they're still on my wish list. But you do need the basics to get started. And every site is different. But again, let's go back to the house. You need something and somewhere to store things. Secure store, dry store, vermin-proof store, bulletproof store, and somewhere for the volunteers that's warm, cozy. Oh God, cove, nightmare. Ended up sitting in cars or outside, never mind. So we've already mentioned access. That's an interesting one, because sometimes you can't do anything about that because of where the land is and where the site's going to go. People don't want to be coming toing and fro, because that sort of defeats the object. So I like some of the ideas of people doing things in groups, group drop off. One of the things that we try is the members drop them off. So members are coming anyway, they take the bags and they drop them off to people who live close by, because you want to minimize your driving. Parking, well, that's a nightmare. Anyway, I think I've more or less done it. One of the things, another kicker is boundaries. Who's around you and what are your responsibilities? Fortunately, our landlords are the National Trust. So we know what the boundaries are and we know who owns them. But on one side, we have somebody who keeps horses. So that's an interesting neighbour. I haven't got into the whole thing about soil, because no doubt that will come up later, and the soil, but they're the kind of infrastructure things that I think you need to think about. our big problem at the moment is shelter. We're higher than windmills. We're 500 feet up. So it's very windy. So we spent a lot of time planting trees. Why wouldn't you? And that was the basic backbone of our site. The thing that we did first was plant thousands of trees. They've not grown massively yet, but that was the infrastructure that we decided that we'd need when we first went to the field. It's rather brisk, and views of Cheviot are smashing, but you don't want to see it all the time, particularly when the snow's vertical. So I hope that's given you a bit of an idea of how we got started and the questions that we asked. And of course, the chat's there if you want to ask me any more. Thanks.
Thanks, Mick. Again, that was a great presentation. Yeah, just really interesting about, yeah, different ways of starting, different places you start from, both kind of, yeah, in terms of where you're at in your life, but also geography and what a difference that makes to what you might put on your field first. So for Mick and Gibbside, trees were massively important, and they've got a brilliant agroforestry system going. So yeah, if you want to go and visit them, do. It's an amazing site. Last time I was there, I saw a tawny owl flying down in between the rows of veg. It was very lovely. So now I'm going to hand over to Rhiann, who's going to talk to us about crop planning. Thanks, Rhiann.
Okay, hiya. So can everybody hear me? Great. As Susie said, this is my first season as the main grower at a CSA. So the caveat here is that I am definitely no expert at this. I can't teach you how to master the hunger gap or anything like that, but I can definitely give you a few kind of like beginner guidelines and like a perspective from a new entrant. So I guess to start with, Susie asked me to talk about year-round growing or filling boxes year-round. So I presume most CSA, like most of you are thinking about that, but that's a decision to take, like whether there are some CSAs that just go through the summer season. But if you're looking to supply boxes all year round, you need to be thinking a bit differently. And I think maybe some of the first things to bear in mind when you're thinking about that is that if your main aim is to fill boxes year round, that's quite different to, for example, being a market garden and trying to churn out as many high value crops as possible during the main season. And that's, yeah, just maybe like an important thing to bear in mind as you're planning. And I guess you're looking to achieve some kind of balance between maybe what you'd ideally like to put in boxes year round and what you can fit into a rotation, so that you're looking after your land and etc. And there's obviously lots of crop planning tools and stuff like that out there. I haven't used any of those. I just use Excel spreadsheets or even bits of paper to get going. But there are plenty of tools out there that might be worth a go. Guess whatever suits you, really. Yeah, and I guess kind of, I think Susie referenced at the start, another thing to consider is whether you plan to grow maybe everything yourself or buy some stuff in, and I guess especially staples like potatoes, onions, carrots, and some people choose to buy those in, they're lower value, but we decided to produce those ourselves, and I think that's partly because it adds diversity to the rotation, but also, like, from my perspective, I think that that's part of food sovereignty, and especially some of those like more calorific things that are lower value, like actually sharing out who produces those. But yeah, that's an individual decision, I guess. Yeah, and then briefly about Kirkstall Valley, I'll just quickly try and share my screen. Sorry. Okay, so this is our site, and you can see that we are about 2 miles from the centre of Leeds, and we are very close to the River Aire, which means that we're quite vulnerable to flooding, especially these lower fields here, and our upper fields, which are sort of here. This is quite an old photo. They're less vulnerable to flooding. So we've based our rotation around having a rotation in the lower fields of summer things and things for storage, and then the winter things in the upper fields where hopefully they're not going to get flooded, touch the wood. So yes, and we're looking to introduce a no dig area. We use a tractor, but we're looking to introduce a no dig area here because it's quite hard to get the tractor on, and we're not going to get into the no dig debate now, but there are definitely some benefits, and we're keen to experiment with that and maybe have some perennial crops in there. Another thing to note is that these beds here are about 130 meters long, and which is kind of, you know, useful for the tractor, but that's probably something we're going to change next year, because if you start weeding a 130 meter bed and you look up, that's a big mistake. That's works the tractor, but not so much for the people. So yeah, things like that, we're definitely going to plan our crops a bit differently. Yes, and I think kind of connecting to what Mick was talking about with storage, we've very much been setting up this year. It's been our first year, and what we sort of had available was an insulated shipping container for storing veg, which our potatoes are pretty happy with, but unsurprisingly it's quite humid and our squash are really not storing well. So I guess I really would emphasize that there's almost no point bothering to plant the seeds if you haven't got the right storage, because you end up having to cut lots of moldy bits off squash, and it's a bit sad. Yeah, so that's definitely been a lesson learned in terms of planning. And then thinking about what you're growing, I guess, as people have said, definitely introducing variety, which is harder in the winter, but, you know, making sure you're doing parsnips as well as carrots and whatever. But like concentrating on things people like. So it's going to depend on your customer base, but for quite a lot of our customers, they've never had chard before, and that's maybe something that as a grower you might think is sort of a standard bit of veg, but for our members, you know, having chard or fresh beetroot is quite like exotic. So yeah, you know, people like tomatoes and carrots and lettuce, and the fact that it's really fresh is already a bit of a novelty. And I mean, having said that, we, you know, I found things like bright lights chard, the multicolored stems, yellow courgettes and stuff like that has been really popular, and people have liked it. But we grew some achocha this year, which no one had heard of. They're a bit fiddly to process. We didn't market them very well. Nobody took them at veg pickup. So yeah, I'd say don't go too wild. And yeah, in terms of seed, we've done a mixture of F1s and like open pollinated seed this year, and I'd say that the F1s have definitely been useful for you know, like guaranteeing crops and that uniformity, but also I think we've probably used too many this year, and you know, if you've all of a sudden got loads and loads of cauliflowers but you only need 40 for your boxes, then it's a bit of a waste, and then next week you don't have any. So I definitely encourage you to mix it up. Also thinking about your market and who you're actually trying to feed, and what you're growing is really going to impact on that in terms of growing foods appropriate for different cultures and different diets. So this year we experimented a little bit with callaloo, which is used a lot in West Indian cooking, and maybe we'll grow a bit more of that next year. But I think just really thinking about that and thinking about like what you're growing is going to affect who wants to be part of your CSA, and what you're aspiring to there. And then also, yeah, like maybe not expecting to do too much too quickly. We only had one polytunnel this year, and so I said we're just going to do tomatoes and a few chilies. We're not going to try and do peppers and aubergines and other things. We're just going to stick to one thing that people are really going to like. Yeah, I'm bearing that in mind. So that was kind of all I'd got. I'm happy to take questions, and yeah, I guess, oh sorry, there was one thing I was going to say, was that in terms of your quantities, what I did this year was I asked Kaitan for their crop plan, and for every, you know, for the purple sprouting broccoli, if they reckon they were doing 120 households and we were aiming to do 40. So, you know, for each crop, I just divided their area by 3 and tried to have about that much of a crop in my plan. And I thought, if we're doing that, we'll be roughly okay. And I'd say that we have been roughly okay. But as somebody said, we are surveying our members now, and if everybody says, oh my god, there was too much cabbage, then we'll do less cabbage next year. Yeah, and so that was all I'd got. Thank you.
Brilliant, Rhiannon. Thank you. That was great. Yeah, lots of things that I hadn't even thought you might put in there that are really useful. So thank you. Brilliant. So I was going to say there's a couple of questions in the chat, but I also wanted to say if the 6 of you that have presented want to ask each other questions, please do, because that can be really interesting as well. So we've got a question from Georgia saying, with variations in land productivity, what would people say the smallest area of land you can start a somewhat viable CSA on? Any idea of how many people can be fed per area would be useful. And then also, how long do you store produce, and do you time harvest with getting the produce into the boxes as soon as possible? Becca's given an answer, so saying that with a 7-acre field they do 65 full veg shares. I think it really varies. So I posted on the Organic Market Gardeners recently because somebody had asked me about a 3/4 of an acre plot that they were potentially going to be able to get their hands on, and I got a massive variety of answers on how much you can grow on a certain area. So I think it's something that I think not just the CSA network, but all of us involved in kind of small scale farming would really like to do some research on. It feels like there are so many variables, it's very difficult to answer that question. I know Emma, who runs the Kitchen Garden People, which is now on the Farm Ed site in the Cotswolds, was previously, I think she started on 1/5 of an acre doing mostly salads, but yeah, and I spoke to somebody this morning that's doing 40 salad bags and 20 veg boxes on on 1/4 of an acre. So yeah, I think you can grow quite a lot on a small area, but it does really depend what you're growing and whether you're year round and all sorts of stuff. But I'm going to hand both those questions over to the other 6 because they've got a lot more experience than I have. Does anyone want to answer that?
I just wanted to, sorry, Becca. I just wanted to jump on and say, just following what you were saying, Susie, also like what you can charge for your membership in your area as well, like, and what people want. So it's not just what's the ground's capable of producing, but also like what is your what the market is as well. And yeah, just echoing what you said, really, that it's really, really changeable. And I think going year round makes a really big difference, as Becca says, like allowing space for storage crops and sort of yeah, that really makes a big difference.
Yeah, because we have 2 acres and 60 members, but we stop in December, so that's the difference between 2 and 7 acres. Is that like 4 or whatever, how many months of the year that we're not doing the CSA? And also it really depends how many polytunnels you have. That's like probably one of the biggest factors, because you might have we've been thinking about this because we might be taking on more land and expanding next year, and we'll have loads more space outside, but not necessarily any more polytunnels. So we might have enough like other veg to do, I don't know, another 40 shares, but if we don't have the right proportions of fruiting crops in the tunnel, then it's not the same, you know, maybe then it's just 20 shares or whatever. So yeah, it's complicated.
Can I just add to that a little bit, which might answer the question in terms of obviously storing as well, because of where we are as well. And again, we switched to community-led, producer-led, and that was because obviously where we're growing as well, the climate around us and our water table really risen. So we spent a lot of time of how we can store our veg in a more sustainable way. So with regards to seasonal, we got it out as and when we could get it out. So we tried a lot of methods this year where we got like sand and stored a lot of our beetroot and onions and potatoes and carrots in sand. We got old fridges and filled them up with sand and then stored our some of our vegetables in that. And we also as well, I added to my boxes this year where I did some preservatives. So because we run community groups as well, we got some of the community girls to cook the beetroots and then put them into jars, and then we also added them to our veg boxes as well. So we sort of did a bit of a twist on it, just so we cut down on our waste and maybe some of the veg as well, which didn't grow so well due to the climate obviously we was experiencing here on the farm.
Thanks, Janine. Yeah, I know Camel CSA in Cornwall have put Cornish sea salt in their boxes occasionally in the Hungry Gap. So there's like some interesting ideas about what you can put in, and preserves definitely can fill a gap. So yeah, ways of storing food that last through, or drying. I think if we're gonna, if we're gonna try and make sure all our produce is as local as possible, they're going to get more and more important. So. There's a couple of other questions. I've got Bethan's asking, do you do recipe cards as well to help members with more unusual crops? And yeah, Becca's just put in storage depends on infrastructure available. So squash are great in a greenhouse, keeps rats out, and good till June. Beetroot and sand good till June. They do dried chili and dried beans. Does anyone want to comment on any of those questions? Ask another question, talk about recipe cards or anything like that?
I think on the recipe cards front, like absolutely, as I was sort of saying, like there will be veg that if you're a grower you might think's quite like normal, but a lot of your members won't have encountered before. But also just like it's all those little things that actually kind of add up in terms of your time. Like things like that do take a lot of time. So if you can make use of, I can't remember, there is a CSA, it might be Camel, that's got loads of great recipes on their website. Or if you've got a really keen volunteer, like that's the kind of thing that some volunteers will really enjoy doing. So yeah, I think if stuff like that you can kind of like farm out to somebody else, that might like really help you out.
Thanks, Rhiannon. So Connor's who's growing in Ireland, Northern Ireland. I think he was recently managing a 10-acre site, growing on 7 acres of that, and doing up to 130 boxes a week with 400 square meters of glass house and about 500 square meters of polytunnel, 10 different size polytunnel as well, 4 full-time equivalent workers, and then perennials really help. So yeah, I mean, I've just been asked, there's a new project called the Orchard Project that's looking at sort of food forest gardening, and it made me think, I don't think very many of our CSAs do have a lot of perennials. I think soft fruit people don't have because it's quite difficult to pick, but I mean rhubarb is definitely a good Hungry Gap crop. But yeah, I'm sort of interested in whether perennials could add to CSA food.
Can't get enough rhubarb.
Becca, thanks Mick.
Yeah, I was just going to say about perennials. So we've taken on like an orchard that's like already well established, and we've already planted another 22 apple trees. So there will be lots more perennials. And so I'm kind of trying to juggle to make the share bigger by basically reducing the amount of vegetables at the time of year when there's lots of fruit. So you're still getting like 7 or 8 items in the share, rather than this year they were getting like 10 items because, you know, you can't hold the plums, they've got to go. And then sort of trying to balance it so there ends up being slightly more vegetables spread out at times of year when there aren't loads of fruit. But yeah, things to consider. And also getting the members to pick their own soft fruit, which can be a problem if they're collection groups. But there you go, swings and roundabouts to it all.
Any of you want to ask each other questions or comment on anything you've heard? No. Any other questions?
I do actually, about dried beans, Becca, and you mentioned that. Like, can you talk about that?
Yeah,
we did it this year, and as a for the first time, and I don't think we grew enough. We grew Belotti beans,
yeah,
and we just didn't grow enough. So we haven't got enough. We've got enough for one of the size of the shares once.
Yeah,
we're a bit disappointed. So yeah,
so what we do is about at least 120 meters worth of bed of dwarf Belotti beans. This year I've also done some cannellini beans as well, which actually have dried better than the Belottis, because the Belottis tend to get mouldy problems where we are. And then before the frost, basically we lift the whole plant, put them all in a polytunnel to dry. So that's where having some spare bits of polytunnel comes in kind of useful. And then they just sort of sit there for a little while, and then we put them in Hessian sacks and bash them with a stick. But we also did some runner beans as well. So basically left some runner beans because it's finally come through to me that people prefer French beans to runner beans. So stop picking a load of runner beans, and then, you know, they sort of dried on the plants. It'd have been better if we'd have not picked them at all. I don't know. But yeah, we'll have a few of those. So, you know, it varies from year to year, whether you get 20 kilos or 40 kilos. It's completely random up to the weather at the end of the harvest. But we're doing a trial with Hodmedod's, looking at, they're trying to find like the quickest maturing French bean for doing dried bean production. So hopefully in a few years, we'll have some better answers on the best beans grow.
Mick, I think you might be able to add, and I can see you've got your hand up. I know Mick Gibbside grow for Hodmedod's. So Mick, did you want to add something?
Yeah, we grew 2 ton of fava beans. The big, and that was combining and drying in an industrial dryer. The problem is processing. The beans grew fantastic, you know, and we were able to sell them to the members. I can't remember what the balance was. We harvested 2 tons. They were sent down, dried to Hodmedod's, and they processed them, but that still wasn't sufficient quantities to be worthwhile. So as they say, there's work in hand in terms of processing these things, because I do think beans, a bit like potatoes and rhubarb, you know, are good staples that we should be growing. But yeah, we can grow rhubarb, we can grow potatoes, we can grow beans, but we can't get the damn things dried and processed. And this is why we did it with Hodmedod's. So in a kind of way, it's Hodmedod's desire to get more people to grow and get involved in growing pulses. So if you are interested in growing stuff on a, I wouldn't say, well, okay, it's an industrial scale. I mean, I'm not, you know, not, it was a big combine, you know, and there were a lot of beans. But if you're going to make a dent and feed your members for a decent period of time, that's the sort of scale that you've got to work at. Maybe slightly less, but that was on 1.2 hectares. Yeah,
Thanks,
I mean,
Mick.
that's the question.
Just for anyone that doesn't know, Hodmedod's is, I think, the only UK pulse producer, well, pulse wholesaler, I guess. And I think they are looking for more UK growers of pulses. They're based in Suffolk. Yeah, really interesting company. We've got about, well, under 5 minutes left. So any final questions?
Could I ask the growers to see whether or not they did any seed saving this year?
Great question. Anyone done any seed saving? Becca?
I did a little bit of basil seed this year. A couple of years ago, I did a bit of chard seed. Yeah, it's not really on the top of my list of things to do, but I'm quite happy to do the odd bit.
Was that for you or to sell to seed companies?
No, just for me. But then, you know, you do 12 chard plants in the quarter of a tunnel, you've got 3 kilos of seed. So it's more than I'll ever use. So I kind of need to find a way to funnel it off to somebody.
Right.
Yeah, we were in the Gaia Foundation seed sovereignty course for Scotland.
Oh, right.
So we grew. I mean, we saved tomato seeds and lettuce seeds. I mean, we always save tomato seeds, but we want to do a lot more. I think actually we're probably going to save some edamame beans as well, because we didn't pick them and now they're dry outside in the weedy bed. So yeah, we want to do a lot more of that, but it's I mean, I'm sure as everybody knows, like integrating it when you're producing for the vegetable crop rather than the seed crop is like a thing you have to get your head around. But yeah.
I think we've done it year on year, but it's growing year on year, as seems to be, and that's just because of the climate we're in. And what made me look into it a bit further this year was the fact that the organic seeds we were getting, we wasn't getting a good yield from them at all, or even some of them wasn't even coming up. So obviously with the climate we've had, especially some of the salad leaves and stuff just bolted, we just left them to go to seed. We're going to transplant them next year and see how they get on with it, just to compare to obviously buying in seeds.
So from an environment perspective, we seem to be getting more yield from our seed saving. So I just wanted to see, you know, across the board to see how that was sort of like panning out in different areas. Thank you.
Thanks, Janine. And yeah, thanks for highlighting seed saving. Oh, it's great. I think the amount of seed that she's produced in Britain in terms of how much is used in Britain, it's less than 3%, I think. And seed is one of the things that I think most, over 90% of global seed is produced by 3 massive companies, who are mostly chemical companies. So the more we can do to produce it ourselves, small scale, the better. Mick, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, on the seed saving, we grow broad beans for wholesale, a bit of a niche crop, but people can't get broad beans anywhere and they don't travel. So we produce a lot of broad beans. But this last year, the seed that we wanted to get hold of failed, so we had to have a substitute. So I've decided this year I'm going to seed save. I'm going to do the normal broad bean, but I'm going to plant ratio and save the seed, because we can't. It's one of those crops we can't do without. We rely on it for the rotation. It's a good product, and relying on, you know, something coming from the Netherlands and it failing means that you're scratching around looking for a suitable. There's a specific broad bean. It has to be short because it's grown in a windy field, and we grew Sutton, but it's too small. You don't get the crop off. So ratio is about, you know, halfway. So this year, Mick will be on his hands and knees. I won't be pollinating them, but I'll just be picking them for next year to see if we can at least get some seed saved. We should be able to, but again, all depends on the weather, of course. But broad beans are usually pretty good at drying. I've done a bit of stuff at home, and they're usually pretty good at drying on the vine themselves.
Thanks, Mick. We're coming to the end of the session, so I just wanted to say thank you to all of you. You've been absolutely fantastic. Yeah, what an amazing wealth of information and knowledge and experience. For those of you listening, I've put our website in the chat. Do go and visit CSAs. I'm sure all 6 of the people that have spoken would love you to come and visit. And yeah, if you're interested in starting a CSA, get in touch, or interested in asking any kind of questions, get in touch. Thank you and bye.